479 BC, Athens, the Agora, the public square. A man stands before the crowd. His name is Lycidas. He's a member of the Athenian Council. Educated, respected. The Persians have sent envoys offering peace. Generous terms. Athens would keep its autonomy. Just acknowledge Persian suzerainty. Lycidas argues, we should consider this. Look what they did at Thermopylae. We can't defeat them. We should negotiate. The crowd goes silent. Lycidas looks around the agora, waiting for applause. Instead, someone picks up a stone, then another, then hundreds. They stone Lycidas to death, right there in the agora. His wife and children hear about it. The Athenian women go to his house. They stone his family to death too, every single one. This is Greece 1 year after Thermopylae. The 300 Spartans are dead. Leonidas is dead. The Persians burned Athens to the ground. But the Greeks aren't broken. They're ready for revenge. And this time, they're not sending 300. They're sending 110,000. To understand the Battle of Plataea, you need to understand what happened the year before. 480 BC, the Battle of Thermopylae. King Leonidas and 300 Spartans held a mountain pass against the entire Persian army for 3 days. They died to the last man. But they bought Greece time. The Persian king Xerxes pushed south. He burned Athens, destroyed temples, slaughtered civilians. But the Greek navy won a stunning victory at Salamis, destroyed a third of the Persian fleet. Xerxes retreats to Persia. But he leaves behind something terrifying. An army so large, the Greeks believed it could erase their civilization. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers under his most trusted general, Mardonius. And inside that army was Persia's most feared unit, the Immortals. Elite soldiers who replaced their dead instantly, so their numbers never seemed to fall. Cavalry from across the empire. Their orders: finish conquering Greece. Mardonius offered peace terms again and again. To Athens, join us. We'll make you rich. To Sparta, stay out of it. We'll leave you alone. The Greeks refused, because here's what the Persians didn't understand. Thermopylae wasn't a defeat. It was a martyrdom. Leonidas and the 300 hadn't just died. They'd become sacred. Every Greek city-state now had a blood debt. And Sparta was done with small honor guards. This time, they mobilized everything. 10,000 Spartan hoplites, the largest Spartan army ever fielded, plus 5,000 Spartan perioikoi, free non-citizens, plus allied forces from across Greece. 8,000 Athenians, 5,000 Corinthians, tens of thousands from smaller city-states. Total, about 110,000 Greek soldiers, the largest Greek army in history. Led by Pausanias, Leonidas' nephew, age 25, regent of Sparta. He had one order from the Spartan council: make them pay. Mardonius wasn't worried. He had 300,000 troops, cavalry superiority, better logistics, and he had a strategy: divide the Greeks, bribe their leaders, make them fight each other. It was working. Some Greek city-states had already surrendered. Others were wavering. Mardonius sent envoys to Athens again. Last chance. Join us or die. The Athenians executed the envoys. Then they sent a message to Sparta. If you don't march now, we'll make a separate peace. Sparta had a problem. It was the Carneia, a sacred Spartan religious festival. Fighting during Carneia was forbidden, but losing Athens would mean losing the war. So Sparta did something unprecedented. They marched during Carneia. The gods could judge them later. Persia needed to die now. the Greek army assembled at Plataea, a small city in Boeotia, near Thebes. Summer, 479 BC, Pausanias positioned his forces on high ground, the slopes of Mount Cithaeron. Defensive position, good visibility, access to water. Mardonius positioned his forces on the plains below, flat ground, perfect for cavalry. For 10 days, nothing happened. Two massive armies watched each other across the plain. Persian cavalry rode back and forth like predators. Greek soldiers stood silent behind bronze shields. 400,000 men, waiting for someone to make the first mistake. Mardonius wanted the Greeks to come down and fight on flat ground, where his cavalry would slaughter them. Pausanias wanted the Persians to attack uphill, where Greek hoplite phalanxes would crush them. Neither moved. Day 11, night. Mardonius sent his cavalry on a raid. Then the Persians found the Greeks' greatest weakness. Their water. The Persian cavalry rode straight to the Gargaphius spring, the only clean water source for the entire Greek army, and they destroyed it. They threw corpses into the water, poisoned it with blood and rot. Then they raided Greek supply lines, destroyed wagons, killed supply troops, burned food stores. Overnight, 110,000 Greek soldiers went from confident to desperate. By day 12, the Greek army was in crisis. No water, dwindling food. 110,000 men can't stay in position without supplies. Pausanias called a council of war. The decision: withdraw to a better position near Plataea where there was water. The maneuver would happen at night, under cover of darkness. But moving 110,000 men at night is chaos. Different contingents got lost. Units separated. Communication broke down. By dawn, the Greek army was scattered across the plain. The Spartans and Tegeans, about 15,000 men, were isolated on a ridge. The Athenians, 8,000 men, were a mile away, separated. The center, everyone else, was strung out, disorganized. Mardonius saw it. This was his chance. He gave the order: attack. The Persian cavalry hit first. The Persian horse archers began circling the Greek positions, thousands of them. Arrows launched in waves. The sky turned black as arrows blocked out the sun. The Greeks formed phalanx, shields up, spears out. Greek shields rang like metal drums as arrows slammed into bronze. But phalanx is designed for frontal assault, not mobile cavalry shooting from range. Men were falling, arrows finding gaps in armor. The Spartans held formation. Barely. Then, Mardonius committed his infantry, the Immortals, 10,000 elite Persian soldiers. The best, they charged the Spartan position. Wave after wave, wicker shields, short spears, bows. The Spartans held the ridge, bronze shields locked, 8-foot spears thrusting, discipline absolute. But they were outnumbered. Mardonius threw more troops, 50,000, 100,000. The Spartans were being surrounded. Meanwhile, a mile away, the Athenians were fighting their own battle. Theban hoplites, Greeks who'd sided with Persia, attacked them. So the two strongest Greek contingents were fighting separately. The center was still scattered, disorganized, useless. This was the moment. If the Spartans broke, the entire Greek army would collapse. And for a few minutes, it looked like they might. Persian archers killed Pausanias' second in command. Officers were falling, lines were wavering. And then Pausanias did something insane. Pausanias made a sacrifice, a goat right there on the battlefield, in front of his troops. Standard Spartan practice, sacrifice before battle. Read the omens. The first sacrifice, bad omens. The gods say don't attack, Spartans don't attack when omens are bad. It's absolute law. Meanwhile, arrows are falling. Men are dying. Pausanias sacrifices again. Bad omens. Again. Bad omens. The Spartans are standing there under fire, waiting for good omens. Men are screaming, "We're dying! Order the attack!" Pausanias sacrifices a fourth time. Good omens. He raises his spear. Advance. The Spartan phalanx moved forward. 10,000 men, bronze shields, 8-foot spears, in perfect formation. The grinding, mechanical advance, they hit the Persian immortals like a bronze wall. The Persian wicker shields shattered against Spartan bronze. Persian short spears couldn't reach past the Greek spear wall. The immortals fought well. They were elite, brave. But hoplite phalanx warfare is mathematics. Longer spears, heavier armor, tighter formation. The Persians were being pushed back. And then Mardonius made his fatal mistake. The Persian general Mardonius rode to the front. White horse, golden armor, surrounded by 1,000 bodyguards, the best Persian soldiers. He wanted his army to see him, to inspire them. But instead, he made himself the most visible target on the battlefield. The Spartans saw him, recognized the white horse. They pushed harder, focused on that position. A Spartan soldier, Amnestus, broke through. Through a rock, the stone smashed into Mardonius' skull. The Persian general fell off his horse, dead. And when the Persian army saw their commander fall, the entire battlefield began to unravel. The 1,000 bodyguards surrounded his body, fought to the death. All 1,000 killed. Mardonius was dead, and the Persian army saw it. The battle lasted hours more, but the outcome was decided in that moment. The Persian center collapsed, started retreating. Retreat became rout. The Greeks pursued. Now here's where it gets brutal. The Persians retreated to their fortified camp, wooden walls, defended by the remaining troops. The Greeks surrounded it. The Spartans tried to assault, failed. Spartans weren't siege experts, but the Athenians knew siege warfare. They broke through the wooden walls, and then the massacre began. This wasn't battle anymore. This was slaughter. The Greeks poured into the camp. Inside the camp, the Persians tried to surrender. They dropped their weapons. They offered gold. They begged. The Greeks killed them all. Not soldiers, everyone. Camp followers, servants, wounded, surrendering troops. Herodotus, the Greek historian who documented this, writes, "Of the 300,000 Persians, scarcely 3,000 escaped." That's not battle casualties. That's systematic extermination. But the Greeks weren't done. They hunted down fleeing Persian officers. Pausanias sent fast units to chase remnants. Every Persian officer must die. No exceptions. This was revenge for Thermopylae, for Athens, for a decade of Persian invasions. This wasn't war. This was vengeance-made policy. The Greeks looted the Persian camp, found Xerxes' personal tent, gold, silver, fine clothes. They set up Xerxes' dining pavilion, prepared a feast using his own servants. Then Pausanias called the Greek commanders. He had them sit in Xerxes' chairs, eat from Xerxes' plates. And he said, "Look at the folly. This man had all this luxury, and he came to take our poverty." It's a good line. But underneath, it's something darker. The Greeks had just killed tens of thousands of people, many of them after they'd surrendered. And they were celebrating it as justice. Maybe it was. But maybe victory corrupts as much as power does. Plataea was the largest land battle of the Persian Wars. 110,000 Greeks versus 300,000 Persians. Persia lost. Never again would Persia invade mainland Greece. The Greek city-states had won their freedom. But here's what haunts me about Plataea. The Greeks won because they unified. Spartans, Athenians, Corinthians, traditional rivals fought together. And then, 50 years later, they'd be slaughtering each other in the Peloponnesian War. Sparta versus Athens. Greeks killing Greeks. The unity that saved Greece at Plataea was temporary. The victory they celebrated became the foundation of their mutual destruction. Pausanias, the hero of Plataea, he became corrupt, tried to become a tyrant, was executed by Sparta for treason. The 10,000 Spartans who avenged the 300, their descendants would watch Sparta decline into irrelevance. The lesson of Plataea isn't that revenge feels good. It's that victory is temporary, unity is fragile, and vengeance, even justified, doesn't erase what was lost. The 300 died at Thermopylae. 10,000 avenged them at Plataea. But Leonidas was still dead. Athens would still burn again, and the Greeks would still destroy each other. Some battles are won, some wars end. But the human need for revenge? That never dies. It just finds new targets. Victory doesn't last. Unity doesn't last. Revenge doesn't satisfy. Only the dead stay dead. This is the story of how 10,000 Spartans avenged the 300. They killed 250,000 Persians. They won freedom for Greece, and 50 years later, they started killing each other. Sparta versus Athens, Greek versus Greek. The men who stood together at Plataea raised sons who would slaughter each other in the Peloponnesian War. Victory didn't end the cycle, it only reset it. Comment below, does revenge ever actually satisfy, or does it just create the next cycle? Don't forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next one.